Okay, I think this is working. Yep, it's working. Now I'll see if I can get these people. Now I can see how to see if I can get everyone invited. Get out of these people. All right, let's see what happens. Perfect. Sonic the Hedgehog 98. Could you let me know if you can hear me talking right now? If anyone can hear me talking, just let me know. All right, I don't know if I have to reload that page. My wonderful planning skills have once again shined through. Okay, no Scully's waiting, so... Oh, okay, thanks for letting me know. Let's do this. And for some reason, it does this weird thing where it does not... there you are. When I was trying to invite you earlier, it wouldn't show me your name. Once again, awkward starts for the win. Wonder how many invitations Scully's gotten by this point. All right, let's see. You're here. Is he got? No, the mic's muted. Something about this is making me think of Unfriended. I haven't watched that movie. I did get to go see Avengers, though. Oh, yeah, I started this early. I thought I started this late. Turns out I started it early. Sonic 98. Could I just call you? I'm probably gonna call you that since that's easier. So, you said you either had it was a broken webcam or a microphone. Which one was it? Let me see if this will. Okay, this might help the problem. All right, now just wait for at least Scully. All right. I'll try inviting Scully one more time. The weird thing about this, from my perspective, is I can't hear anyone, and I'm pretty sure anyone who's watching this right now can hear me, so it's kind of weird. Oh, I got a viewer. Yay. Alright, just need to wait for a few more people. all I really need is, okay, I'm pretty sure, like, anyone who can, like, can anyone see the questions thing? Could someone, like, type in a question if they can see that? I don't know if anyone can. Ah, Scully, you're here. Oh, thank God. Anyway, do you have anything to say?
I had nothing to say.
Okay, yeah. Awkward starts again. Turns out, I thought I had this at 8, and then after a few minutes, like, I started this up really early, and then I realized, oh, it was at 8:30. Oh, oh, nice. You can use. Like, anyone who can, like, can anyone see the questions thing? Could someone, like, type in a question if they can see that? Hearing my voice just seems weird. Anyway, I think we've gotten enough. I think we have enough people for this discussion. Let's start. We'll just let everyone kind of. So, nostalgia gamers.
They're bad.
What's defined as a nostalgia gamer?
Yep. I've been here for the past few minutes, actually.
Right now I'm hearing kind of a playback of what I was saying earlier.
Whoa. Whoa.
Okay, yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, can you hear it too? I thought I had this at 8, and then after a few minutes...
Dude, it's like I...
Whoa. Who's doing that? Did someone rewind?
I don't know who's who anymore.
I'm creeped out now. Anyway, so let's actually get on to the discussion, though.
Like, hold on a second, I gotta... Hold on a sec. Oh, I think this might explain it. Just wait for this to fuck off. Okay, is this... can you hear it anymore?
All I can hear is my squeaky chair.
Good. It was on my end. I was watching the discussion because I wasn't sure if the invite thing was working.
Yeah, one of the many things that some person who would probably just randomly find this years later will probably just watch, and once they see this point, they'll be like, all right, I'm out of here.
Or they'll probably laugh at our comedic antics.
You gotta love them. Anyway, so should we go on to the topic, or should we just kind of like, or should we kind of warm up a bit, just kind of, casual greetings?
Let's warm up.
All right. What have you been doing recently?
I just got up.
I just got off work. So apparently around where I'm working, there's like all the baseball and basketball teams, and they all came, and it was like just in this one thing. I'm not joking. It went on for 5 hours straight. Of just
what do they want?
Just a nonstop line of a bunch of big families ordering a lot of stuff. Everything was running out of stock and all that. Ew.
Jesus.
Actually, you know what? No, I don't feel sorry for the night shift people. Very few of them actually do anything.
So what, do they just, I don't know, fuck around and clean shit?
No, because if they did, that would mean I wouldn't have to clean stuff when I got to work the next day.
I'll be sure to pick up a napkin for you.
Yeah. So anyway, once again, we're starting to stray off, but I haven't really been doing too much. Well, I'm almost off school. Next week's my last week for college, for my semester at college. So
Well, that's nice.
I will have even less free time.
Yay! Now you're gonna have like commitments and shit.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, not much else. I got the Sonic Heroes CD that came in not too long ago. No, not yesterday, 2 days ago.
That's nice.
And I gotta go see the new Avengers movie.
Age of Ultron.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Man, never really had any interest in the Avengers.
I remembered, I remember when I first saw it, like my friend, CJ, him and his
Yeah.
dad apparently had it on DVD. I remembered, I went over to, just visit him for a while. I remember they were just like, when they heard I hadn't saw it, I remember they were just like, sit down, have some pizza, you're watching this movie.
It's I know for a lot of people it's like one of those, must-watch movies, but
It's very entertaining, admittedly.
no, I'm not doubting that, but I don't know. Like again, I don't want to be that guy who just thinks that that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has just become oversaturated with everything. But
It has. It has.
yeah,
That's the problem.
I don't know. Part of me is,
It's lost its novelty. And I will admit that shows with the new Avengers movie.
honestly, this is something that I do plan to tie in with the nostalgia gamers discussion to some extent, but just keeping it, on point to my own opinions on the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe thing. I think the gimmick has kind of worn out its welcome since, again, there's like a real big oversaturation of superhero movies, and a lot of them just tend to be all like, oh, this is connecting to another franchise. It's one that I recognize, and especially since that it's done so well, I have somewhat of a fear that, the superhero movie genre, I guess we can call it now, is probably going to end up being burned out in a couple of years because of that.
That's the downside for like any sort of thing. Like when they put too much of the product, people just kind of get really sick of it, and then they just go and look back at it as, oh man, that was so horrible. That whole period of time was just awful. Like the Nostalgia Critics Dark Age of Movies type of video. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I saw it recently actually, and he pretty much is listed as the era from 1996 to 2001, which conveniently happened to host, the sort of superhero movies like Steel, Spawn, and the Joel Schumacher Batman movies.
hmm And yeah, the downside is like when you have too much of that kind of similar type of style, then people just kind of look back at it as, oh man, that era sucked. Oh man, it was so awful. And then of course you got people who kind of grew up in that era loving it and like, oh, I like that era. And then people just start screaming and it ends up in a big war.
I think the reason why a lot of people tend to dislike a lot of the angsty stuff compared to the stuff now is because back then it kind of needed to be, as I kind of needed that 2000s angst, with like all the, the very brooding and new metal and post grunge soundtracks and all of that, because that was kind of needed to make the superhero genres to be taken seriously as much as it was. Because I honestly don't think that a film like Batman Begins or The Dark Knight would have done as well had it been released in the era of Spawn or whatever.
hmm Admittedly, I don't really care much for Nolan's Batman movies.
It's admittedly my favorite era of the Batman. I never really held that much of contempt for Tim Burton's movies. I can see that they're good, but it's just something on a more personal level that doesn't appeal to me.
Oh,
I didn't really
you can
like the
actually
returns
put
of it.
that into the Nostalgia Gamers discussion. People letting their own personal taste kind of judge actual quality, where they mistake their personal taste for quality.
I think you should elaborate more on that one since we're finally getting into this.
You know how, I hate constantly talking about him, but some call me Johnny. You know how where he was kind of judging the 3D Sonic games based on how well they emulated Sonic 3?
Yes.
And then, it's kind of that whole it kind of shows his bias toward. He shows like a heavy bias. Like it's kind of he will not overall like them just because they're trying to do something new. It's again kind of that whole thing with nostalgia gamers where they kind of just they don't really want to take a risk, but and then sometimes they say that they want a risk, but they want a risk that favors them, and it just becomes a mess.
There was a comment on
the they want to return to their childhood.
Yeah, actually, there was a comment on the I think it was like the True Spirit of Sonic channel, which can't remember what video it was, but I'm pretty sure there was a comment there that said something along the lines of, again, people want a game, or a Sonic game in particular, to be to be completely familiar to them, yet at the same time they want something that'll sweep them off their feet. And again, you can only have one or the other. In the case of Colors, it would be completely safe. The plot wasn't too serious. The badniks were back. The Sonic and Tails were simplified thanks to writers like Pontac and Graf.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you had a game like Sonic Unleashed, which for the most part was going into uncharted territory. I mean, you had Sonic, which was going really fast, and then you had the Werehog gameplay. It was...
Mm-hmm. Admittedly,
and yet, Unleashed was the one to kind of sweep people off their feet.
Sonic's always been kind of a weird case in that, where people just, like, worry that, and to an extent, this actually makes sense, especially now. Like, they worry that, that this new type of trend for Sonic will just continue. Like, you've seen Pro Jared's review of Sonic Adventure 2.
I tended to avoid his review after I seen what he did for Shadow the Hedgehog.
Basically, like, one thing I noticed is, like, in the beginning, he was talking about his Rise of Lyric review, and he was, like, talking about all these comments saying, oh, Adventure 2 was really good, was probably the best one, and, I love those ones. And then it just seems like he was worried, like, oh, no, all these people in my comment section are liking this. I must nitpick everything and pretty much do what I do to make people think that it's bad, because I have something personal against it. So I must trick everyone to thinking it's actually bad.
Seems like I was right to avoid it.
And that's one big problem. You can never really avoid it, though. There's this reviewer named Jamboree, which I like. One thing I like is even when he does give his overall opinion, one thing I do like is at the end he gives, like, recommendations. Like, he says, if you liked these kind of movies, you'll probably like this one as well. At least it gives kind of a general idea of, well, okay, I mean, it's not for me, but if you kind of like these things, you'll probably like this too.
That's usually why at the end of my reviews I say you'll probably get a kick out of this if you enjoy, such and such. I think it's more noticeable in my earlier videos, but yeah. It's just something you say, if to the sort of people that do enjoy, things such as that.
Mm-hmm. The big problem with most reviews, even when they try to say that it's their personal opinion, they never really give an outright idea of, is this for you or not? Very few. Like, have you seen Nick Magna's review of Lost World?
Yeah, I've seen it.
It's weird in that way where he goes so in depth, but it never, like, for me, it never really gives an idea of what I'm really getting into. It's bizarre. He goes so in depth. It's that my big problem with a lot of the really long reviews. They try to go in depth on the minor things, but as a result, like, it really doesn't give a good, clear. For me, it doesn't really give a good, clear idea of, what the whole point was. It doesn't really give a clear idea of if I like it or not.
The only thing I remember about his entire Lost World review is when he was kissing Clement's ass by saying, like, oh yes, you made me see the light. I love you. Smoochy, smoochy.
Fun fact, I found that game for $20 at a Walmart.
Did you waste your money and buy it?
I bought it. It's kind of that, it's a weird, I'm just using that as kind of a note of, okay, I'm saving up for a Wii U, which I'm halfway there by this point. But yeah, like, I was looking at a lot of gameplay footage, and I'm just thinking, I'm going to like this for a while. And I'm so desperate for new 3D platformers that have at least a decent amount of 3D. Though admittedly, it's kind of that Mario Galaxy, Mario 3D World 3D. The one that tries to avoid the problem where people who can't wrap their brains around moving the camera for whatever reason kind of do. like dislike. Like I was having a conversation on one. Well, it's more of an argument for a guy where the guy was just saying the camera in the adventure games are atrocious, and he can't really find another word outside of atrocious. The
Yeah, I
problem.
think I saw that in the debate.
Yeah. I hate it when people do that just because I really can never get the idea if they just can't really. It's like most cameras for me work fine. Like to me, like a bad camera really just doesn't like. Generally, you don't have any control over it, or it just kind of forces you against it. Admittedly,
What do you
it's
do,
kind of
Crash Bandicoot?
what?
That's the only particular criticism I have for the Naughty Dog era Crash Bandicoot games, where the camera was pretty much fixed, and whenever you had to backtrack to get boxes and shit, it would, unless of course it was a boulder level, it was pretty much just fixed directly to your back and would not flip over if you had stuff that you needed to get, which was a particular criticism of mine, but that's beside the point.
In fact, I'm working on this short kind of venting out frustrations video about collectathons where people love to complain about them. Like, again, with nostalgia gamers and all that is most people don't really have any patience to really learn anything, and I think that's actually kind of sad for like something like collectathons, which do have a lot of freedom and a lot of replay value to really go around and do stuff. Like I know a lot of people criticize Donkey Kong 64 for having too much in it, but considering that you only really need to get half of the stuff, I actually really love how they have all the things that you can do, all the items you can get.
You want to know the weirdest thing? In Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, there was actually a little jab at, like, whether this was intentionally, satirizing people who hated collectathons at the time, but there was actually a little line there saying, like, sorry, stop, this is too painful. Gamers today don't want to run around collecting things.
That's his review, and yeah, I remember, like, I kind of thought the same as him and most other people who were fans of it. Like, it's the game itself, the main reason why people hate Nuts and Bolts for the most part is, like, it just insults them for liking that. It teases them saying that it's going to be like this, and then it insults them for wanting it to be like that.
Yeah, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the time of Banjo-Kazooie's, or at least at the time of the game's release, it was released at a time where, games like Ratchet and Clank and, platformers to a degree were still going somewhat strong.
Mm-hmm. They weren't dead yet. That style of 3D platformers, the full range 3D platformers is what I like to call them. They weren't dead yet.
I'd say they will probably be gone by the end of the 2000s, actually.
Mm-hmm. Which is sad, because I think we brought this up about 3D platformers, like, they have a lot of variety and just a lot of options, but the downside is all those options seem to make things complicated for some people, and, like, I think nowadays one big problem, like, look at the popularity of, like, iPhone games, which are, like, very simple to understand. I think it's kind of made it so people just, like, have no patience to learn anything.
I guess I think that's probably because, like, in this generation, we've been raised under a mindset of, again, we want, especially in this day where we have, like, phones and we're just far more connected to technology than we have been in years prior. We're just under the mindset of, okay, we want this product and we want it now. And, the moment we have to wait and be patient for things, we're just like, ooh, angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, have you ever seen that South Park episode where Cartman freezes himself to get a Wii?
Yeah, I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like that, where people are just, like, on the internet all the time, just, like, looking, when's it gonna be out?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those deadly things about having, like, just about everything at your fingertips. Once you're waiting for the new stuff, it's just painful.
This is probably just going to end up into a future where we're all ended up, like, trapped into some sort of Matrix-like device where we're all just so connected to technology we'll just, like, never leave.
I would refuse to do that. I wouldn't really want to get that focused into technology.
True.
I mean, of course, I'm going to guess someone's going to go, well, just complain that I'm some oldie person. I have gotten complaints like that once, a couple of times before.
Such as?
Yeah, it was just like, you're far behind and all that. Like, you can't, yeah, you're stuck in the past. Generally just basic, you're stuck in the past type of things.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Then
that's
again, I've
okay.
been criticized. Then
Well,
again, I've been
that's...
criticized by my own family for being stuck in the past to some extent, but
Mm-hmm.
actually, by a lot of things, I think I'm stuck in the past for kind of a few things, actually, at least in terms of, things that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Which makes sense. And let's actually get onto the nostalgia gamers type of thing. One big problem is, like, I don't mind, people, enjoying things, kind of old style things. The problem is when there's, like, no other options for the people who don't enjoy it.
Honestly, I seem to cycle it as kind of a cyclical trend thing, because again, like if you look at a lot of things from the 80s particularly, again, like a lot of things were back. I guess it was the 80s was an era that from as far as I can tell was trying to emulate the 50s, and I guess because a lot of them. Especially since we've discussed many times in the past that a lot of them are trying to relive their childhood, man, children, or otherwise. I think because now that they're 30-year-olds and now that they have the power in terms of how the world works these days, I think that's the reason why a lot of them tend to be, or at least a lot of the 2010s seems to be very 80s inspired in some aspects, i.e., big glasses, etc.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, most people love to, like, bash the decade, like, for example, 80s kids. Like, nowadays, you know how a lot of people are just, like, in love with things from the 90s, and now the 90s are just treated as the worst decade ever, kind
I
of
think that
thing.
I think the 2000s are actually, by extension, treated as oh yeah, man, even worse than the 90s because at least the 90s held some sort of you know 80s remnants, and then the 2000s held the angst-ridden late 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could connect that to the Nostalgia Critics Dark Age.
Oh no.
Is that your catchphrase? I hear that from you so many times.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just something I do whenever have to do something I don't want to. It's only take out the garbage. Oh no!
I just groan.
I just,
Ugh.
I just do that because it's slightly comical.
Mm-hmm. So anyway,
In any
Nostalgia Gamers. So, I remembered you were Scully, you were talking about in your one video, like, about how most people love things that were, simple but brutally difficult and all that.
Again, that was more so of a design philosophy from the companies themselves rather than the gamers. Because back then, again, a lot of games ran under arcade logic, which was and I think games like Castlevania and Mega Man were kind of the antithesis of. Again, you had to pretty much master the stage, pixel by pixel if you wanted to beat it, and be skilled and have the respect of all your school friends in which you could talk about it and be nerdy and all that sort of shit. And I think the reason why a lot of people tend to say, and I think especially why the reason why a lot of games like Dark Souls or everything being, praised for being difficult is mostly out of the fact that, if it's difficult and not any casuals can play it. And I think you raised this point before as well, because of the fact that, again, they just want gaming to be a hobby that's, relegated to themselves rather than, anybody else getting their sticky mitts into it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you want to join gaming? Well, you must play by our rules and our terms.
Pretty much.
Hmm.
And again, like I think I also brought up the psychological angle of it. Of again, they don't want filthy jocks slash bullies that if they used to know in high school playing it, and they see it as somewhat of an invasion of their safe haven.
Hmm.
But that's just me looking at it from a more psychological angle.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I was never really all that social, and yeah, so I never really needed a safe haven.
Well, to be honest, I was a little bit psychosocial. No, I'm kidding. No, I was also very antisocial. A lot later in my life, actually. Absolutely sad face, tears streaming down, all that sort of garbage.
Hmm. I got nothing. Anyway, so let's actually talk about one thing about like difficulty and all that, and how most people just act like it's hard to control thing like games made in the early 3D era because it was so complicated. Like they controlled awful, they've aged horribly. What do you think of
Uh,
those? What?
you know, honestly, a lot of early 3D games I found were actually pretty damn difficult. And honestly, even worsening than that, a lot of 3D games, especially during the fifth and sixth generation of consoles, were actually very hard to program for.
Hmm.
And again, I'm not saying that I have any, expertise in, 3D mapping or programming myself, but I can only imagine how it would have been with the bare bones technology you would have had back then.
And I was talking to this one guy who was just like, 2D is always going to be better than 3D. 2D always ages better. I'm just thinking, no, it doesn't. I mean, most of the NES library, I mean, look at a lot of the Angry Video Game Nerd videos. I mean, there's quite a big bunch of bad stuff in there.
Yep. In, Actually, you know what? In many cases, I'm pretty sure there's a Korn song that perfectly describes that guy. It's called Blind.
Hmm.
And honestly, when it comes to, I don't know, you just find those sorts of people everywhere. When it comes to, talking about a game that's older than 1995, I'd say.
And then when you get to 1996, people just go, oh man, 3D, oh man, these games are horrible. Despite them getting a bunch of praise, like, you only like them because of nostalgia and all that, completely ignoring their own hypocrisy.
They're a bunch of hypocritical hippopotamuses.
Yeah, like, people just, like, these exact same people go, well, 2D games were much better, they worked a lot better, and then these are coming from the exact same people who grew up with these type of games and kind of learned them.
Pretty much.
hmm And then, yeah, of course, then you got plenty of 3D games that do quite a bit, that do kind of the same thing, but there's more to it, so there's more ways for you to screw up.
Yeah, that kind of leads me back to the whole topic of Sonic and how a lot of people tend to say, oh man, the adventure games had bugs and glitches and stuff because they were all 3D.
Even in a game like 06 where there are really bad bugs, most of them I see online are completely triggered by someone purposely trying to do it.
Pretty much.
I mean,
honestly,
bad ones like the wall glitch, which, yeah, that one can be random. Outside of that one, most of them are triggered, are just like people trying to trigger them.
Pretty much. Again, I'm not going to go out of my way and say that 06 is well programmed, mostly because of the fact that, again, there are, yeah, and that's mostly in terms of controls for a lot of other things like the snowboarding segments or the way that Sonic and Silver can just kind of stand on objects, and despite the mass, like if you're standing on one of the billiards balls, like you can just stand right in the edge of it and not fall off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's more to do with physics than anything else, but I don't know, a lot of people tend to make 06 look worse than it actually is in terms of a gameplay point.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the game itself just seemed more like, again, it's kind of that whole, with nostalgia gamers, it's more personal than actually bad. Like, most people were, like, when you look at the complaints, I mean, the most common complaint I hear for 06 is not bugs, not glitches, not all that. It's things like the story and all that, the look of it, things like that.
Honestly, I'm hearing more so the look of it than, the story, because again, pretty much everybody by this one has said Sonic 06 is the worst game ever, and if you like it, you suck. But I think what a lot of people tend to, completely gloss on is pretty much, the art. So I was like, oh, it's too realistic, I don't want it to be cartoony. Where? I mean, it was okay for adventure, but I was young and I liked it back then.
Nowadays, people are just snapping back at adventure.
I do not see. And again, like, I'm not sure whether or not this is the fact that Sonic Colors has, happened, but but Adventure never really got that much flack, at least until Sonic Lost World / Sonic Boom rolled around.
Hmm. Well, to be fair, it was more around 2012 when those games were getting a lot of the flack, mostly after Generations, aka
Yeah.
nostalgia whoring the game. Which was it was a good game. Though I will admit, I played it again recently, and it is not as fun as I remembered it. Mostly just because, which is interesting. Like, it was mostly like a lot of nostalgia and all that, but since I was mostly more accustomed to the adventure style games, and there wasn't really too much for that in terms of gameplay, then you know, not really anything for me.
I'll admit, loads were fired when I did play Speed Highway and City Escape in HD, and that was something I really enjoyed. But the thing about Generations is, and that's a really curious case because of the fact that a lot of the game was actually fairly cut out. Like initially, there was supposed to be three Sonics. Like there was supposed to be classic Dreamcast, voiced by Ryan Drummond, and modern, voiced by Roger Craig Smith.
I would have loved that. I would have loved that. Admittedly, like my favorite stage in that game is Modern City Escape, so I actually would have loved to see what the Dreamcast version would have been like.
I think the Dreamcast version was going to be like a mock-up. I guess Sonic 06, or as close to the adventure formula as they could, styled Sonic, and I think this is further confirmed by the fact that the voice of Big the Cat, Kyle Herbert, initially had like far more lines to read. So it does make me think that it was initially going to be Dreamcast Sonic that was going to have, and maybe even a couple more levels to Generations as well, like kind of removing the side missions, which would probably be some post-game shit you had to do.
Hmm.
Which makes sense when you think about it, because there's like 3 keys per mini game, and then you have, three Sonics. It kind of makes you think that things were kind of switched around a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
But Mhm.
But anyway, we're getting off topic.
Well, to be fair, we're kind of on topic. We're on topic and we're not on topic at the same time.
We're bipolar.
Yes. But yeah, like, what do you? But yeah, I've just really noticed a lot of people like to criticize like games made in the N64 to GameCube era, like just like these things have not aged well because they like I hate it when people just go these graphics are horrible and all that, which really is. I do not like it when a person complains about a game's graphics. Like, if you're gonna complain about that, more likely than not, they're a graphic core. I have not played any game with so bad graphics that it's unplayable.
I only really get that way with some NES games, but even then, that's probably mostly because I didn't grow up in the era. I don't know. It's some games the color palette really puts a strain on my fucking eyes, man.
Hmm. And then we got like again back to nostalgia gamers. You know how a lot of people like to go, games were so much more challenging back in my day.
I think we've already talked about that, and again, I did put the whole arcade discussion, and I've kind of already covered that with the whole mentality of it.
Hmm.
But it's just senile gamers, for the lack of a better word. Just yes, that's right, Sonic the Hedgehog. We call them old grandpas.
Yeah.
A very adequate term for them.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, and to be fair, like the big problem I have with all that is like most of the difficulty was flat out unfair. I think, like, for example, you have Zelda and Metroid. Like, I can't stand those games. Those ones, like, you know how you really can't play them without some sort of guide.
Yeah. Well, again, it was designed in a manner in which you were supposed to spend a lot of time exploring, and because of the arcade style thing, again, it was based on an arcade thing where if you died, okay, put in more quarters to continue.
And then when you combine those two type of styles, they just clash horribly.
Pretty much.
To be fair, the original Zelda had the save feature, though that thing is awkward to use.
A lot of save feature. It was an era before 3D gaming and memory cards and auto saving and all. and all
no,
that. So
like
you
they
know what?
still have
That's
this right.
understandable.
They got this right in the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, and honestly, that was understandable because it was back in the '80s. Like I didn't really expect games to be that savvy with the whole save feature the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, especially considering the fact that games back then were pretty much just seen as, it was kind of seen as kid stuff back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kid stuff. And then they had the Zelda rap. You've seen that commercial, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, the one that
I
has.
saw the Japanese commercial. Honestly, the Japanese commercial made me laugh more, actually.
Japanese commercials always do that.
Okay, I'll save it for another time. We don't want to get too off topic, but I think. What do you think about the sort of? Like I said, there's a very large breed of gamers that tend to look at a lot of serious games, especially now more than ever. They just say, "Oh man, these first-person shooters and stuff sucks. Gaming is supposed to be simple and cartoony."
It's kind of, I think, the exact same. It's kind of this, yeah, it's this weird mentality that just kind of repeats where, over time, oh man, that stuff's so cartoony. I want it more serious. And then you get, angst and all that. And then years later, the next crowd of people come in and then start going, oh man, that angst, ow, the edge. And then, and then it goes again, and then, kind of back and forth. Admittedly, that cycle's kind of breaking because now the young generation, kind of after that, is just kind of getting their, with the internet and all that, they're kind of getting their enjoyment and all that more from reviewers and all that, who more often than not favor the 80s stuff.
Yeah, because it's the stuff that they grew up around, and I was kind of hoping that the internet, in some shape or form, would kind of break that, considering that it has things from all eras of time. Like it has stuff from, it pretty much has the whole of the whole of documented human history right at our fingertips.
Yeah, like the good thing about the internet was it could break down that pattern and give more variety, but instead it just kind of killed it.
Pretty much.
Which is sad, and I think that's why, channels like the True Sonic Spirit channel kind of started up, which I love that they did that, just because, there's no real counter. Like, you talked about the internet herd mentality, and most people just kind of, there's like this big general idea of what's good, what's bad, and then, yeah, and then you can't really, and then most people just won't let you think outside of that.
Well, that's it. It works on a very majority rule sort of basis, and again, the way I look at it is because there's more people from, because there's more people more technologically savvy with everything from the 80s. Again, their majority is by this point law. I mean, give it maybe like 5 to 10 years, and we'll probably see a lot of kids from the 90s, changing things up a little, saying that everything from the 80s kind of sucked because reasons. And then they move into the 2000s kids where they say everything, well, not necessarily everything from the 90s sucked, but more so elements of, the light and cheesy shit was not, as golden as everybody remembered it from the 2010s, and I see this kind of being a cyclical thing, to be honest.
Yeah. Admittedly, and every generation has their thing, but the thing I hate about most nostalgia gamers and nostalgia-based people is they love to just deny everyone their kind of thing.
That's something that I think has only ever really shown up in the internet, because if you were talking about a game you liked beforehand, like you'd mostly be doing it in person among friends by saying like, "Hey man, did you play that new game? Oh yeah, it was so cool." And then now, like, if people have something of distaste to say for it, they just say, I have to come in and tell people who obviously like it. Therefore, they'll praise me as a hero for saving them from something that is obviously bad.
I will make them see the light. They will know the truth. Which is, everyone will think like me and the world will be perfect because I am perfect because I am me.
I just imagine you like on a pedestal saying that.
No, but I do have a blanket with my arms raised, like I'm just kind of laying down.
Arms raised in a V. Anyway,
Yeah.
Jam references aside.
Mm-hmm. And if you know,
Honestly,
nostalgia, like for most people, has just kind of went up really quickly. Like nowadays, this morning was better than right now type of mentality.
I've never seen it in that sort of perspective,
That's
like
kind
this
of an
morning.
exaggeration. It's an exaggeration of it, but it's kind of that whole this morning. Oh, I remember this morning. It was so long ago. Oh, this morning. There was so much promise.
Oh, I
Oh, this
remember this.
morning, where promises was high, like I am right now. Oh man, now I'm sober now. Oh, reality sucks.
Okay.
So
I'm now okay. If there's ever going to be fan fiction written about you, it's going to be a slash fic with you and this morning.
I would love a slash fiction with the well and the truck from Sonic Adventure 1 and 2.
Oh, oh my god.
They're just so perfect for each other.
Just like you in the morning.
uh, Speaking of fanfiction, since we keep going off topic, at least we try to hold ourselves in at least a realm. We try to. That's the charm of our discussions. We try to stretch things out and see how far we can stretch it out. So let's try this again, and let's hold on. Yeah. Here. Thanks. Good night. So that happened. I have socks now.
I wish I had snacks. All I have is 3 cans. All I have is 3 empty Pepsi cans.
I drink root beer.
Drunky.
Anyway, but yeah. So let's actually see if we can stretch a bit of nostalgia, and let's talk about bitter nostalgia.
So, where would you begin with that?
Where you look at something and you just think, oh, I remember hating it, and then if you see some sort of mild popularity, you must destroy it immediately.
Honestly, that's more to do with hype than anything else, and I guess it's more. And honestly, the example I use for that is Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a relatively new franchise and it has a lot of sequels that have been released months apart of each other, and I think the reason why a lot of people attack the games as much as they do is not necessarily for the frequency in which they come out, because the games, well, they seem relatively. Well, I'm not going to say they're relatively easy to make. They seem to be
mind as a tool, just kind of a part of. Kind of like how when people, for example, let's go back to 06, where people complain about bugs, it's just kind of a tool. Like, you can't really say, this game sucks because it has trains and a dog. But then we say, it has glitches and all that. Oh, but it also has a dog. It's basically sneaking other arguments in with something else. MovieBot knows a lot about
everybody.
that.
Well, I love Haley, the beloved dog.
But this morning was better than that dog ever could be.
Potato chips can't fill the hole that it left behind.
But root beer might be able to, because that root beer was from the morning before this morning.
Hey, you can't drink your problems away. The morning's gone.
Neither can you, not with your Pepsi.
Don't, it's too painful.
This has gotten awkward. Okay, we've stretched this really far. Let's go back.
No. Okay.
We've stretched it too far. There's a point when you gotta say, okay, I went too far.
Yeah. You finally admit you have a drinking problem, drunkie.
Yes, I'm addicted to water.
Oh, fuck.
No, I'm
Oh,
not
that hurt
joking. Like, I have like a million water bottles.
uh, oh, I'm sorry about that. That hurt my throat more than any death growl ever could. Anyway,
But anyway, let's actually talk about like bitter memories. Let's just start with something pretty interesting. You know the bitter hatred towards recolors.
yes, Death Spike the Echidna, you will forever be a part of my heart.
Yeah. It's one of those really good examples of where people just hate on it so much, and then they just kind of it's forever associated with something to the point where even when it's no longer relevant, they just still bring it up as if it exists. And I think recolors are the best example just because they have not been around since the great DeviantArt purge of 2011.
Pretty much.
You've heard of the great
I,
Deviant. What?
I always kind of thought the bronies took their place.
That was the great the great DeviantArt purge of 2011. Did you ever hear the story?
Nope.
I will tell you the story. Once upon a
Oh,
time, once upon a time in the internet, there was a place called DeviantArt. For a while, it was ruled by one of the biggest fan bases, the Sonic fan base. While at the time there were plenty of different places for these people, the main Sonic group that went to DeviantArt were the Recolors. They were generally despised just for their quote-unquote pretentious art, but for years they ruled. But then that all changed, starting in 2010, when a group came baptized from the fires of internet hell, known as 4chan, came. They were so bad, they were kicked out of hell, and they had to go roam somewhere else. They went everywhere. They created their own sites and purged anywhere else they could find. And they went to take over DeviantArt. The Recolors tried to fight, but there was no chance. The bronies stomped them. They took them out within minutes. And now, when you see that battlefield, you'll see nothing but the dead Recolors. May they rest in peace.
Whoa.
The end. Nighty-night, Timmy. Sweet dreams. I might write a fan. I should write like a short story about that.
Yeah. Gather around the campfire.
Trying to make internet flame wars as epic as possible.
You succeeded in that, my friend.
Anyway, but yes, basically getting onto the point. It's kind of the whole nostalgia kind of thing where, admittedly, the bronies was a bad example since it was kind of new, but even then there's kind of some nostalgia with people like Lauren Fast kind of working on it. And to be fair, while I do think the show's pretty good, it was more or less a victim of, it more or less got its popularity due to good timing, where, people were hating all the animation going on from the 2000s, I'm trying to remember where it started, from around 2004-ish to 2009. Like, I think a lot of people associate it stopping around 2010. But yeah, and then, things like that were just kind of like, the 2000s were just kind of knocked over and just kind of swept under the rug.
Honestly, at least most Western animated shows I've found have honestly tended to reside with more cartoonish roots, akin to that of like the early 90s sort of comedy, for the lack of a better word, in the sense that it was a show that was never really there to take itself too seriously. It was more or less just there as a parody / satire. And like, again, I don't want to criticize any of the animators, but most of them look like Flash games you would have seen in like 1999, like on bloody Newgrounds and all that sort of shit.
How long has Newgrounds been around? I don't know how long they've been around.
I think it's been around since 1990. It's either 1995 or 1997. I only know this because I used to go on the site like so many times, like way back when.
All I knew about Newgrounds was the place where Sonic Shorts was.
Oh yeah. I only knew about Newgrounds because of the Flash game Pico School.
Hmm. Speaking of nostalgia, here's a little bit of nostalgia of my own. We don't really see that many good parodies anymore of like certain video games. Like I think Sonic does not get good parodies just because most of them are always done in a mean-spirited tone.
I think it's mostly because of the fact that again most parodies today tend to be like, oh look, we are being a game that is bad. Laugh at us. Ha 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 ha
Hmm.
ha.
That and most people love to take the parodies really serious. This is actually why I really like Roger Von der Weid's parodies. The guy does go more for neutral and all that.
Yeah.
Which is sad that you never really see that anymore.
Yeah. I think the internet has kind of loosened the whole neutrality aspect of, you know, no neutral. I guess it's more or less the neutrality of a discussion among people, you know.
Hmm.
Because like, if you're talking to someone in person, like, they're not going to straight up insult you, and if they are, then they've got some serious fucking balls to do, unless of course they want to get punched in the face. But over the internet, it's just text, and they see it as such, and they can pretty much envision anybody they want to when they're typing it. Which is why presentation, when you're typing out a comment, is completely necessary in order to show how whether or not you're intelligent or if the point you're raising is actually, you know, decent.
The problem for me with most people trying to be intelligent on the internet is a grand majority of them tend to, well, be pseudo-intellects.
Ahem, movie, Bob, a-thon, cough, kasplutter, achoo, several other sick
Here, take a
ailments.
cough drop. It'll help you speak it better.
Nummy, I can speak clearer already.
Movie Bobs. Movie Bob.
What a guy. I tell ya, the Italian mob needs to go. And fast. Hey, Sonic, you're a fast guy. Go kill him.
One thing I hate about nostalgia gamers, though, especially now, and even just in general, is when people go, "This is how everything will be fixed and made perfect by making it all for me."
Yeah, it might fix the problem for them, but for everyone else. Oh no. It won't fix it for them, it'll only fix it for you.
And the downside is when certain franchises seem to be in some sort of issue, whether for popularity, most people just see it as an opportunity to go, "This is how it'll be fixed by mutating it into something that'll better suit what I want."
I've seen a lot of people run into that mindset, actually.
I think Song's actually a really good example where people go, "This is how you will fix the series by making it into Mario." Again,
I really hate the sort of people that just tend to say, well, Sonic could learn a few things from Mario. It should just be, cartoony and only have Sonic and Robotnik. And then, well, maybe Tails can join. I guess Knuckles, since he was part of the classic ones as well. Maybe Amy for the girls.
No, not her. No, not her, because I didn't play Sonic CD as a kid.
But you're destroying my childhood. I'm reverting to
Sonic
typical
CD.
Grinda.
Speaking of Sonic CD, I think the main reason that game got popular was mostly just because it was
a classic Sonic game that nobody played.
Yeah, no one really played it, so when people found it, they were just like, "Oh wow, it's it was to them the real Sonic 4, and to them because it was made back before Adventure, people were just like, "Oh well, then it was made when it was good," stuff like that.
I still think Sonic CD is a relatively good game.
I haven't played too much of it.
Again, even barring a lot of the quote unquote nostalgia for it, there are still a lot of people who played it now as opposed to back then, and they just see it as, oh well, I don't see why this game is the best game of. And I honestly never saw how people said that. Yeah, well, I know a lot of people say that Sonic City is the best, but I don't agree with it. I'd say Sonic 2 is the best because it was cartoony and Wii nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think I've ever seen anybody say that Sonic CD was the best game ever.
A lot of people were saying that around. It was before Generations. It was before Colors. It was around the time I think Sonic 4 was around. Came out.
Oh yeah. No, I was still kind of in my re-indoctrination into the series by that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I wasn't really
For
that
me,
aware of
most experience with the series. For me, most of this experience with the Sonic series was mostly just from watching parodies.
it. No, most,
And now
most
I
of my
have a job, which means
what?
I have money to get those games, and it varies.
Ye for expendable income.
Mm-hmm. So anyway,
You
what
know,
were you gonna say?
that was kind of a point I wanted to raise about nostalgia gamers right now. Actually, was because of the fact that it seems that a lot of games now aren't necessarily tailored to kids as much as they are, 30-year-old man children with expendable income.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like how we have like a lot of revival projects like Mighty Number Nine, and I forgot what the recent uh, the Banjo Kazooie spiritual successor was called. But a lot of
I
games now and a lot
have.
of subs in general tend to be tailored to a lot of that sort of crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have anything to add to that?
I got nothing really to say. I'm trying to think of where to go from this now.
Well, I guess we could kind of tie back to the whole the superhero movie genre I was talking about in the first place. And this is something that I think was kind of raised in the Nostalgia Critic's Dark Age of Movies video, and is that a lot of people, especially now, tend to prefer like a lot of the lighter superhero movies. Like to use an example, The Avengers. I'm not doubting its quality as a movie, though I haven't really seen it myself. But the thing I'm going to be raising here is that it definitely seems a lot lighter in tone in comparison to a lot of the darker DC movies that are coming out, like debatably Man of Steel, the Dark Knight trilogy, and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're reading a comic on the other side of that, I'm going to bitch slap you through the internet.
Yeah. There's always, that 1 second rambling video that we did that I was planning on uploading?
Yeah?
So something got screwed up and now that's gone.
No.
Anyway, let's continue.
Okay.
Where should we go to next with Nostalgia Gamers?
I guess kind of what this might mean for the future, because like watching nostalgia gamers now kind of gives me some sort of a predetermined fear that in some shape or form that a lot of people later on will eventually become like them and start, bitching and complaining to the extent that they are by saying that my era was better than yours. Because again, like I don't ever want to be the sort of person that provided that everything is still as is, or in terms of, I guess sort of becoming the parent sort of role, like in the sense that we'll be the ones complaining that the current generation doesn't have any of the stuff that we were nostalgic for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just something that I want that makes me think a little bit.
Yeah. So, do we have anything else? What is there anything else to say? For me, though, my thoughts with the future, The main thing I worry about is like that again, kind of like, certain eras are just going to be left and forgotten and just seen as, oh, well, that time sucked. Let's just ignore that ever happened. Like,
You want to
oh,
know what I
remember
think it is?
when
I think it's
remember when those were popular? That was just bad. Those games are horrible. They just got popular because they were new and all that. Yeah, they're bad. Let's
you want to
go
know what
play
I think
some
it is?
Super Mario Brothers.
Or how Movie Bug thinks that Super Mario Bros. 3 is the best video game of all time.
He wrote a book about it.
Buy my book. Buy my book. Buy my book. Buy my book.
That book just goes and shows some interesting things about him.
I think you've already read some excerpts.
Yeah,
Before.
where he was just going stuff like the image of the curtain coming is burned into my mind, like 9/11.
That was written in there?
Yeah. Or like, yeah, he was like, it is burned into my brain the same way 9/11 was and JFK's assassination was for my parents.
What the fuck?
It's a weird thing where when you read it, you're just like, oh, wow, this guy has something wrong with him.
Call the police.
Mm-hmm. Who has the music on?
Now, this is something I have in the background. Mostly
Ah.
because I can't function without my tunes, dude.
So
Don't
anyway,
worry.
should we continue this recording or should we stop by this point?
Now let's continue. We're on a pretty good vibe right now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what do you think about the sort of people that tend to view and I think nostalgia might play a huge part in this as well, but what do you think about the sort of people that claim that Ocarina of Time is the best video game of all time?
People still say that?
I'm pretty sure they do. It's on a lot of people's top 10 lists.
Huh. I don't know, considering that now the N64 stuff is being considered awful, I didn't think that people still liked that game.
I think CJ brought it up in a hangout that we did ages back, but I'm pretty sure he said something along the lines of people are very, very easy to switch up their opinions on certain Zelda games, initially when
Of Time, I think he said Ocarina of Time was for a while seen as the better game, while Majora's Mask was seen as more. I don't really know what to make of it. And then Wind Waker was hated for its cartoony look, and then Twilight Princess was loved, and then Skyward Sword was loved, and now Skyward Sword's hated. When Ocarina of Time is the horrible game, while Majora's Mask is wonderful. Twilight Princess was just like, oh man, where's all the color? Wind Waker's the best. Things like that.
the Zelda fanbase is very hard to predict at times.
Mm-hmm. Like, for the most part, they do love a great majority of the games, but the ones that they prefer just gets random. And then you got the ones who go, Link to the Past is the one true Zelda. Like Eco Raptor, who says that.
Yes. Yeah, and that's another thing I kind of like to bring up, because especially with a lot of old games like the Mario series and Sonic, like they'll have a set amount of games that they'll love and dislike, and I think in the case of Mario, it'll be Sunshine would be the one that they like the least in terms of the main series, mostly because of the fact that it was a game that I guess pseudo attempted to have like a storyline akin to that of more Sonic Adventure-ish, although at least in terms of direct storytelling, that is.
Mm-hmm. And then most people and then quite a few people see storytelling in games as just bad.
And again, that's another thing that I think also relates to nostalgia, the fact that a lot of people tend to say that storyline is bad. If you want story, then go watch a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Or the sort of people that say that, oh, games should go back to being games.
Mm-hmm. Really, when people say, like, these things should go back to this, it's generally just them saying, more often than not, it just sounds like them saying, I want to go back to being 5.
Yeah. That was a time in life in which you had no responsibilities, no cares in the world, and you pretty much just, I don't know,
Except
did
for
shit.
homework. Except for homework. That was always there.
Nothing lasts forever. Not even banks.
Yeah. And then again, we can actually talk about reverse nostalgia where most people see their childhood as just terrible and all that, so they just associate everything with that era where they were a kid as just being bad.
I've never really seen that happen. Are there any examples of this?
Well, yeah, it's very rare, but it's kind of it's weird, it's rare. Like, I've only seen it in comments that, like, really hard to find ones, too. I don't know if I can find that. I'm trying to remember the name of that video where I saw it. But here's kind of an example. Like, I think we talked about it quite a bit. Was Movie Bob? Like, he hates the 1990s and all that.
No, that was mostly because he was a teenager back then. I mean, I guess it is still technically part of your childhood, but it's not necessarily, early childhood, for the lack of a better word, where everything you view. And I guess maybe that was more of an extreme case of what I was thinking about at the time, but I think in Movie Bob's case, it was more or less a time in which, he started getting abused for his interests, and as a result, he closed himself off and became the bitter person you see in the early Game Overeater episodes.
Hmm. Why is it that most douchebags on the internet are overweight?
Because they're fat with a PH.
No, really, did they, like, I think the funniest case is Movie Bob, who flat out goes and yells at people for being unfit, which is why I think most people call him stuff like Game Overeater and all that, just because, well, clearly you care what people's weight are, and the guy doesn't even mention his own.
Yeah. As we've stated before, he's a hypocritical hippo.
Yeah.
In more ways than one. And honestly, actually, that's a very interesting point you bring up, because one thing I've found, especially in terms of reviewers now, that a lot of the ones that are popular tend to be the sort of ones that are, that are intentionally critical, like Yahtzee or bloody Ego Raptor in some cases.
Yeah. I think the reason a lot of those guys get as popular as they do is because, like, again, with someone like Pro Gerard, like, again, I was having an argument with a guy on that True Sonic Spirit channel about Adventure 2, and the guy's like, "We'll watch these reviews by Call Me Johnny and Gerard, and then say that the game's good." And I'm just thinking, those guys do nothing more than just kind of try to pick things apart as smallly as possible, just so he can say this has a problem. And even then, quite a bit of the time, they cherry pick things.
Pretty much. Actually, if April Fool's this year, I was actually planning to do like a mock review of Silent Hill 2, based entirely around that, by pointing out the insignificant details and using footage from the inferior HD collection just to show that the game sucks and anyone that likes it is an idiot.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, I decided to go AWOL for a little bit, mostly because of personal reasons, but yeah, it didn't really end up happening. I'm still tempted to do it, actually.
Well, I did my April Fool's joke 6 days late.
No, it was still around the time, though.
Mm-hmm. You remember that one, though, right? The Spider-Man Dreamcast review?
Oh, yeah, that was...
It was a part of the review. It was the Venom highlights when I was just talking about the writing.
I love that one. You used the bits of the What If mode, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay, I know this is completely off topic, but more games need a What If mode like that, seriously.
I love those minor details that just they're just fun to look at. Admittedly, it makes Carnage voice more unlistenable than it already is.
Yeah. But still, we were treated to I am Miniok.
Yeah. My favorite was the Mysterio with the fish head, the fish bowl in his head.
No, my favorite part was the part where when Mysterio was still disguised as Spidey and they were doing that whole Matrix montage when they first met him. It was like, hey, the imposter! And he just like jumped in midair with bullets there for some reason.
But let's actually talk more about when we were talking about Movie Bob being a hypocrite, let's actually go more into the hypocrisy and the double standard of nostalgia gamers. Like, I remember you were talking about how most of them just say, like, games from the early 3D era are just horrible and haven't aged well. Well, the stuff they grew up with are timeless classics that can never age.
And that's mostly, I see that mostly in the case of Ego Raptor more than anyone else, and to a degree some call me Johnny as well, but the thing that, right. Anyway, the thing that I see for a lot of those things is that, when a lot of people look at a game that, they feel nostalgia for, like, even if it's bad, they tend to overlook that because, again, it was an era that the majority loved. They either A, never heard of it, or B, just kind of ignored it and went off to go play something else, because there are a lot of games in the 3D era that do indeed suck, but at the same time, there's a lot of games in the 2D era that also suck, as you brought up in the AVGN's, endless library of terrible NES games. The thing of it is, and by extension,
the problem when people start to say this era sucked, it's very cherry picking.
It is, and honestly, by extension,
this is why I hate people when they go, "This era was perfect," without, or at the very least, like when they assume again, it's kind of that whole assuming that what they like is what everyone's gonna like.
Honestly, I think more of it is, and again, this is something that I think Ted brought up from the, the Brain Scratch guys. I think what it is for a lot of people is that, again, I think they recognize that, there are some games of their era that were bad, but they just tend to ignore that when they're talking about, their favorite games, as opposed to the 3D era where they have no such nostalgia for it, and as a result, they see the problems as overwhelmingly bad because they can't overlook it the same way that they can overlook the, childhood nostalgia.
Yeah. What do you think? Sonic 93? Or no, it was 98. That's when Adventure came out in Japan. I mean, no one's going to see it, but...
I could read it out.
Oh yeah, you can do that. I'm actually setting up a Dreamcast right now.
No, that's good.
The plan is after this chat's done, I'm going to open up a new one for us, and I'm going to test something.
Alright.
Kind of.
Oh, cool! I hope you don't mind if I read comments in like a Jason
Griffin
voice.
I'm going to test something to see if me and you can do kind of a Let's Play-ish thing together.
Oh boy. You take that, Brain Scratch commentaries, your rivals are coming.
With Scully and AHAT96. And whoever else wants to join. I have absolutely no standards for who wants to join. You have a microphone? Come on in.
Yeah. It's all up in the open.
So, anything else you want to bring up?
The only thing I really have left to bring up is... I guess more so in terms of, how a lot of people tend to view, I guess, kind of the effect that it's had on certain franchises for the whole nostalgia gamers thing, and I think Sonic is kind of the antithesis of that, mostly because of the fact that when it comes to, I guess, trends, for the lack of a better... And honestly, I was getting into a discussion on the True Spirit of Sonic video. I think it was like in the case of, I think it was maybe the voice direction, and I think it's really because... I guess it's kind of the way that people view the character now as opposed to how they did back then, where they just see it as now as like a big cartoony blue hedgehog versus a scientist again, and that shouldn't be taken seriously, even though we liked Adventure 2 back in the day and all that sort of garbage.
In all honesty, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if most of those people liked it before.
Now, honestly, there are some people whose opinion had changed, because, like, again... like many people back in the day used to cite, the adventure games, at the very least, as one of, the good ones. Whereas now it's just seen as, oh, well, it was good back then, but now it sucks.
And then you get quite a few. I see more people who just say it always sucked.
That's only because they recognize it now, and those same sort of people used to consider it not as good as the Mega Drive games, but still decent.
Mm-hmm. In all honesty, I think that was more to hype and marketing of the Genesis games. Like a lot of the old like mostly I think that was just due to the Sega Nintendo rivalry that's still going on pretty much.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I see a lot of, and I think the reason why I think the Genesis era is probably more remembered than a lot of other eras is because that was the one that was most heavily advertised. Like, because again, you've seen, like, there are plenty of advertisements of, or at least American advertisements, I should say, Sonic on the Mega Drive, Sonic 1, 2, and 3, and it was all heavily advertised because, again, it was very much what they were trying to do to compete with, Mario and all that.
Yeah,
and then you get to the Dreamcast era where, it might have gotten a game advertisement once or twice for, games like Heroes or Shadow the Hedgehog. And then you get to 06, which is a game that was probably advertised to the extent of the Mega Drive era, which is the reason why I think a lot of people tend to say that game sucked, aside from being the 15th anniversary. Because again, like, if you look at the advertisements for Sonic 06, you see slogans like, "Welcome to the Sonic Age." And like a lot of advertisements bigging it up to be, the next big thing.
Mm-hmm. I miss those advertisements.
A lot of game, like, I know, off topic again, but a lot of game advertisements have really lost their sheen, because, like, I did an entire a review of them, like, with a lot of them, and there were a lot of Ratchet and Clank ads, Jack and Daxter ads. I find a lot of the Sony ads, actually, to be very creative in that department, because there are a lot of, funny shit that tends to happen in them.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you knew Blue, think again.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let's actually, it's getting around to that point where I think it's going to force longs. Never mind. So anyway, let's actually maybe finish this off so we can do that next test. But anyway, it's been great doing this. Final thoughts.
They suck.
Let's let Sonic 98 give his first, and Scully can just read them out.
Okie dokie. This is a very suspenseful event.
This is Hitchcock right here.
As in, what final thoughts?
Final thoughts, as in your overall thoughts on the topic for nostalgia gamers.
Oh, most nostalgic gamers are very biased. Obviously. Is that all? But I feel that there's this weird...
The suspense is terrible. I hope it'll last.
Point in which they are kind of credible. In what sense would they be credible, actually? I don't really get it myself, either.
Anyway, Scully, your final thoughts.
Honestly, nostalgia gamers, as far as I'm concerned... Again, I've probably summed this up millions of times in the past, but I'll say it here. Nostalgia gamers, as far as I'm concerned, they're people from the 80s who are desperately seeking to relive their childhood and effectively force their nostalgia upon the kids of this generation, therefore continuing the cyclical trends of, again, 80s light and cheesy franchise continuing, all that sort of thing, see, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then, you know, it's pretty much just going to be a cyclical trend in which, you know, darker energy will eventually rise again. Then, you know, the cartoonishness of the 80s will once again rear its ugly head back up, and it's just going to continue onwards and onwards until we die, and then I don't give a fuck what happens by that point.
Mm-hmm. Now, as for my final thoughts, now, people enjoying something out of nostalgia, that's fine. I do it all the time, too. The big problem with online is that it seems like there's no real counter. I mean, I don't mind to me, I like seeing more than one side of an opinion, and the problem is most people love to, like, again, the whole internet herd mentality, most people love to straw man the other side to make them, well, look dumber to the, well, uninformed, impressionable side. So the big problem for me is that there's no real counter to the nostalgia gamers, and most counters really are just kind of shoved into a corner of the internet.
Pretty much.
Anyway, it was great doing this again. I might do another one some other time. I'll see you all next time.
We will meet again in the winter solstice.
Goodbye.